There are days when you can't even cry anymore. You just sit there in a dark room and breathe. Not because you're at peace, but because you're exhausted. Because you have no idea how to take the next step. The girl in this story, she's been there too. One heartbreak, and it felt like her whole world collapsed along with her heart. She looked around, no one. No hand to hold. No shoulder to lean on. No eyes that truly understood. Just her, in a silence so deep it was terrifying. But in that very moment, when every sound outside faded into nothing, another voice appeared, not from the living, but from the past, from whispers of ancient wisdom, crossing hundreds, even thousands of years, to reach her exactly when she needed it most. It wasn't a miracle. It was just an old book, a collection of Proverbs, teachings from those who had suffered, fallen, and risen again, just like her. And that's when the journey began. Not to find someone to lift her up, but to learn how to become her own anchor. She once had an ordinary life. Nothing remarkable, but it was enough. It was whole. Until one day, everything fell apart. A sudden twist of fate. Maybe it was a broken relationship, a dream that slipped away, or just a lingering emptiness she couldn't name. Whatever it was, it dragged her into a darkness she didn't even notice herself slipping into. It started with a few sleepless nights. Then came the unfinished meals. The conversations where she'd force a smile just to seem okay. No one noticed, but she did. She could feel herself slowly disappearing. She didn't want to open up anymore. Didn't want to explain. Because even if she did, who would really listen? So she pulled back, like a small stone sinking quietly in the rush of life. Each night, in her tiny room, there was only the sound of her sighs and the soft, lonely glow of a yellow lamp. Sometimes, she wished someone would knock on her door, take her hand, and say, "It's going to be okay." But no one ever came, until one night, digging through a dusty pile of old books in the corner of her closet, she found a nameless notebook. On the first page, in smudged brown ink, it read, "Fall 7 times, stand up 8. Just 8 words, but they rang out like a bell, shaking something deep within the silence of her soul. She sat still, staring at the old notebook. The pages were yellowed with time, the ink faded. And yet, that one line stood out, clear as day. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. So simple, no frills, no poetry, but somehow it made her heart tremble. She read it again, and again, and suddenly she felt something inside her stir. Not because she was ready, but because for the first time in a long time, she simply wanted to try again. She turned the pages. Dozens of proverbs stared back at her, each one a voice from the past, from civilizations long gone, from strangers who once lived in a world with no electricity, but carried a light inside them that burned brighter than most today. If you don't have no one to hang on to, be your own rock. Turn your face to the sun, and the shadows will fall behind you. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." She didn't know why, but every single phrase seemed to reach into the darkest corners of her soul, as if someone, somewhere far away, had lived through exactly what she was going through. And from that place, they left behind a message, like a key, waiting to unlock something in those who came after. She began copying each quote onto sticky notes. Each color meant something different. Blue for hope, yellow for light, pink for kindness. She placed them on her mirror, her windows, the corners of her room, so that every morning when she opened her eyes, the first thing she'd see was a reason not to give up. Each morning, she chose one quote, read it slowly, carried it with her through the day, not to prove anything to the world, but to speak to the part of herself that hadn't given up yet. And then something changed, not the world around her, but the way she saw the world. Instead of starting her day with dread, she asked herself a new question. Which quote will I live by today? Some days it was, do good and throw it in the sea. She helped an old woman cross the street, even though no one was watching. Other days it was, speak the truth, but leave immediately after. She finally said no to a toxic relationship. Tiny actions, gentle choices, like bricks, quietly rebuilding the person who once felt broken. She was no longer standing at the edge of life. She was walking one small step at a time, guided by the ancient voices she had once found in silence. The destination was still unknown, but at least now, she had begun. She began to change, quietly, without warning. It wasn't some grand awakening. It was just a regular morning, like any other, when she suddenly realized she no longer felt afraid to wake up. Before, every time she opened her eyes, it felt like a heavy stone pressed against her chest, a nameless weight that made it hard to breathe. But now, even though she was still alone, still in that same little room, she felt calm. No one had come to pull her out of the darkness. There was no miracle, no saving hand, but from within the silence, she had learned how to truly listen to herself. She still went to work, still walked the same old streets home, but instead of looking down, she began looking up. Instead of rushing past everything, she started to notice a wildflower growing through the cracks of the sidewalk, the way the sunset touched her shoulder, the sound of birds chirping on a third-floor balcony. She called them little miracles. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough to make her smile, even if just a little. And most importantly, she stopped waiting for someone to fill the emptiness inside her. She had come to understand something simple, yet deeply true. If you don't have no one to hang on to, be your own rock. Instead of crying because no one listened, she started journaling, each page a raw, honest conversation with herself. Instead of waiting for praise, she learned to celebrate small wins, even if it was just getting out of bed 10 minutes earlier than yesterday. And instead of hoping someone would come along and finally understand her, she began the journey of understanding herself. There were still nights when she felt sad, but that sadness no longer swallowed her whole. It was just a light rain now, and she knew she could sit in the rain without falling apart. She was no longer afraid of being alone, because now she knew walking alone doesn't mean you're lost. She was walking alongside hundreds, thousands of ancient souls, the ones who had left behind their words, their wisdom, like lanterns glowing in the darkness. And with every step she took, she was moving forward, guided by the timeless strength of those who came before. In that quiet, gentle moment, she realized she was never truly alone. Little by little, those old proverbs stopped being just gentle reminders. They became her compass, the guiding light she used to navigate every step of her new life. Each morning, while the world outside was still half asleep, she would rise quietly, open her small notebook, the one where she had handwritten her favorite sayings, carefully, lovingly, word by word. Each page felt like a different land. Some quotes came from distant Africa, some from ancient Chinese dynasties. Others echoed from the Mediterranean, centuries old. Different tongues, different cultures. And yet, every single one carried something deeply human, deeply real. Measure 1,000 times and cut once. It reminded her to slow down, to think carefully before making big decisions. Beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. It taught her to stop comparing herself, to stop chasing someone else's definition of beauty, and to begin cherishing her own. Whoever gossips to you will gossip about you. It warned her to keep her distance from drama, and helped her master the power of silence. But the one that moved her the most was this: it takes a whole village to raise a child, because no one grows up alone. No one becomes whole without love, without guidance, without the stumbles that someone else helps us stand back up from. She began to see the world with different eyes. Every person who crossed her path, even just for a fleeting moment, might be part of her village. The stranger who said something kind at the bus stop. The old friend who sent her an instrumental song without a word. The co-worker who gently placed a hand on her shoulder when she looked distant. All of them silent puzzle pieces, helping her patch herself back together. Just like the ancestors once passed on seeds of hope through simple, enduring words. And she realized ancient wisdom isn't outdated. On the contrary, it's timeless and pure, because it's been refined through real pain, real joy, real faith across generations. Those words were seeds, and her soul, softened by all the storms, had finally become the fertile ground where they could grow. She no longer searched for answers in complicated places. Sometimes, all it took was opening her notebook, reading a single, quiet sentence. And just like that, she'd find her direction again. Because now, she was no longer lost. She was walking a path paved by those who had lived, loved, fallen, and risen. There was one thing she had always avoided, not the people who had hurt her, but her own past. Every time she closed her eyes, old memories would come flooding back, like hidden currents beneath the surface of the sea. The wrong choices, the times she gave up, the dreams she abandoned, and most of all, that look in her own eyes when she saw herself in the mirror. Eyes filled with disappointment, frustration, and a sorrow no one else could ever truly understand. Over time, she had found light again. She had learned to walk on her own. She had discovered the whispers of ancient wisdom. But to move forward with lightness in her heart, she knew she had to turn back, not to blame, but to embrace who she used to be and forgive her. One quiet afternoon, she opened her notebook and wrote, "To the girl I used to be, I'm sorry. I blamed you for not being stronger, not being better. But now I know you did your best." A single tear fell onto the page. But this time, it was a tear of release. Because she finally understood. She didn't have to punish herself anymore. No one is born knowing how to live perfectly. And sometimes, falling is the only way we learn how to stand tall. She remembered an old proverb. There is no shame in not knowing. The shame lies in not finding out. She used to think she was foolish for not seeing the pain coming. But now she realized every journey begins in not knowing. And she was already walking the path of discovery. One step, one day at a time. She also remembered, a fault confessed is half redressed. To admit our mistakes, to own them with courage, is already a step toward healing. And she had found the courage to look straight into her old wounds, to see that inside the cracks, there wasn't just pain, but strength. That day, she sat in front of the mirror for a long, long time, not to fix her hair or her face, but to truly see herself. Like an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years, she whispered gently, "I forgive you for all the things you didn't know, and for all the times you tried so hard when no one noticed." It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something softer, something freer. The moment she realized, to move forward with peace, you must first stop hating the parts of yourself that were simply trying to survive. At some quiet moment, she realized her heart no longer felt heavy. There was no announcement, no fireworks, no magical light breaking through the clouds. Just an ordinary late afternoon. She was making tea in her tiny kitchen, and the sunlight slipped through the window. She looked up and smiled, not a forced smile, not one meant to reassure others, but a soft, honest smile, the kind that rises from deep within the soul. It was the first time in a very long time that she felt a kind of joy, simple and unshaped, not from anything grand, but from something incredibly human, breathing and feeling grateful just to be here. This transformation made no noise. It was like a seed, germinating in secret beneath the soil, quietly pushing upward, until one day, without warning, it broke through the earth. And now, spring had returned to her heart. She began saying thank you more often, to others, and to herself. Thank you for surviving the darkest days. Thank you for holding on, even when there seemed to be no reason left. Thank you for still feeling something at the sound of music, in a glance of a stranger, or in a soft summer breeze. The heart that loves is always young. That old proverb floated back to her, and for the first time, she understood it fully. Her heart had never died. It had only fallen asleep beneath layers of frost. But now, with the warmth of light and time, it was beating again, gently, but fiercely. She began opening up, not because she needed someone to rescue her, but because she knew now the heart shines brightest when no longer fears being hurt. She started writing down her wishes again, no longer trimming them down to be realistic, no longer shrinking them out of fear of disappointment. She stopped placing happiness in the hands of someone else, or in a someday that never seemed to arrive. Instead, she chose to find joy right here, right now, inside herself. When the sun rises, it rises for everyone. That sentence used to feel like just ink on a page. Now, it was a declaration that she too deserved a full life, deserved love, deserved laughter, as much as anyone else on this earth. And so, she kept walking forward, not as the girl she used to be, hiding in the dark, but as a woman reborn from within, with a heart that burned like sunrise after the storm. When we make it through a storm, we're never the same person who walked into it. The girl she used to be, the one who feared the dark, who shrank herself to avoid getting hurt. She no longer lives in those shadows. Now she stands tall, head high, eyes forward, not because she's no longer vulnerable, but because she's learned how to be strong even when she feels weak. Some scars remain, but they don't ache anymore. They become mile markers, reminders of where she once fell and how she got back up on her own 2 feet. She hasn't forgotten the sleepless nights or the time she felt the whole world had turned its back. But now, instead of regret or bitterness, she feels gratitude, grateful to the version of herself who didn't give up, grateful for those ancient words that lit a quiet fire in her soul when everything went dark, grateful for the strangers who left behind, a look, a sentence, a fleeting moment that shifted the direction of her life. Turn your face to the sun, and the shadows will fall behind you. That isn't just a quote to her anymore. It's a way of living. She chooses to face the light, not because it's always bright, but because she wants to become a source of light for others. Drawing from her own journey, she begins to write pages of truth, reflections of growth. She shares her voice online, reaches out to those who feel lost, just as she once was, because she understands now. Everyone who finds their way out of darkness carries a small torch within them. And if even one of us learns to raise it high, that flame can guide someone else, maybe even a whole generation. If you don't have no one to hang on to, be your own rock. That line, once her lifeline, is now her legacy. She's not the strongest. She doesn't have all the answers, but she's the one who kept walking when every part of her wanted to stop. And sometimes, that is what matters most. Her story isn't an ending. It's a beginning, a spark, for anyone drifting, anyone doubting. To remember this, if you start within, listen to the wisdom of time, forgive yourself, then no matter how far you've fallen, the light will always find its way back to you. And if you're feeling lost in the middle of dark days, remember this. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to return inward, listen to your own heart, and take one slow step, as long as it's real. Because sometimes, the light doesn't come from outside. It comes from you, the one who refused to give up. Ancient wisdom still whispers to us through the smallest of phrases. But if you know how to listen, you'll understand this. No pain is ever meaningless, and no heart, if it's still beating, is beyond the chance to shine again. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey. This is BraveSpark channel. We'll see you again, where the light inside you keeps reaching further.